The vote was 17-3. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka watched the holographic tally float above the Galactic Concord Assembly Chamber, each red marker a species that had chosen to ignore humanity's plea for help. The Draven hegemony was coming, and the galaxy had decided that 12 human colony worlds were an acceptable sacrifice. The Concord thanks the human delegation for their concerns, the Fenari moderator announced, his four eyes avoiding Tanaka's gaze. However, we find insufficient evidence to warrant military intervention. Tanaka said nothing. She had presented satellite footage, intercepted communications, and refugee testimonies. The evidence was overwhelming. But evidence meant nothing when convenience demanded blindness. 3 days later, the Draven fleet arrived at New Brisbane. The colony world held 9 million humans. Farmers, teachers, engineers, children. They had built their civilization on a world of golden plains and purple forests over 2 centuries. They had schools and hospitals and dreams. The Draven gave them 6 hours. Commander Sketh watched from his flagship as the orbital bombardment began. His species had done this many times before. Soft species always broke quickly. They would resist briefly, then surrender, then accept their place as slaves in the hegemony's labor camps. It was the natural order of things, but the humans did not break. They fought with mining equipment and farming tools. They hid their children in underground shelters and stood in the streets with weapons that could barely scratch Draven armor. They refused to kneel. Sketh found this annoying. They are too resistant, he informed High Command. Harvesting them will cost more than they are worth. The order came back within minutes. Cleanse the world. Make an example. The plasma bombardment lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 7 million humans were dead. The survivors, barely 2 million, were dragged screaming into transport ships. The cities became glass. The farms became ash. The dreams became nothing. On Earth, a young girl named Suki was celebrating her birthday when the news arrived. Her aunt had promised to visit from New Brisbane next month. Suki would never understand why her mother started crying and could not stop. President Amara Okonkwo received the report in her office at midnight. She read it twice. Then she walked to her window and looked out at the lights of Lagos, at the billions of human lives going about their evening. Unaware that the universe had just declared them worthless, she made 3 calls. The first was to Fleet Admiral David Okafor. "Wake them up," she said. "All of them." The second was to the Secretary General of United Earth. "Convene the War Council. Full authority protocols." The third was to her daughter. "I love you. I am sorry for what comes next." At 3 in the morning, the planetary defense sirens sounded. Not the warning pattern for incoming attack. A different sound. One that had not been used in 300 years. The call to arms. Across Earth, people stopped. They listened. And then they understood that in Berlin, a retired soldier put on his old uniform. In Tokyo, a grandmother who had flown fighters 60 years ago walked to her local recruitment center. In Mumbai, medical students volunteered for combat medic training. In New York, in Cairo, in Sydney, in cities and villages across the planet, humanity answered. The Galactic Concord received Earth's formal withdrawal from the Alliance at dawn. The message was brief. It contained no threats, no demands, no negotiations. "We trusted you. You sold our children to monsters. This relationship is over. Do not interfere with what comes next." Ambassador Tanaka transmitted the message personally. When the Fenari moderator tried to respond, tried to explain that the Concord's decision was complicated, that politics required difficult choices, she simply ended the transmission. In the rings of Saturn, lights began to glow. Ships that had floated dormant for 200 years received activation codes. Crews who had trained in secret for generations finally learned their purpose. Project Prometheus was waking. Commander Sketh received reports of the human response and laughed. A minor species throwing a tantrum. They would learn their place soon enough. The hegemony had crushed dozens of races who thought they could resist. He did not understand what he had started that on New Brisbane. The glass plains cooled under alien stars. 7 million voices had been silenced. 7 million stories had ended. 7 million humans had died because the galaxy found it convenient. But Earth remembered every single one. President Okonkwo addressed the planet that evening. Her voice was calm. Her eyes were not. "They believe we are soft. They believe we will mourn and move on. They believe we will accept this loss and learn our place in their order." She paused. They are wrong. We are humanity. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not abandon our dead unavenged. Somewhere in the void, the first human warship began its journey. Its name was painted in letters 10 meters tall on its hull. Remembrance. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. It had confused human kindness for weakness. It had mistaken human patience for submission. It had looked at a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and its own nuclear weapons, and somehow concluded that they would accept genocide quietly. They would learn. They would all learn. 0.7 million humans had fallen. Earth would answer, and the answer would shake the stars. Beneath the frozen surface of Europa, a door that had not opened in 170 years began to move. Ice cracked and fell away as massive hangar bays revealed themselves to the void. Inside, row after row of warships sat waiting, their hulls dark, their weapons cold. Their purpose finally arrived. Fleet Admiral David Okafor stood in the command center on Mars and watched the activation reports flood his screens. Saturn's rings, the asteroid belt, the dark side of Luna. Hidden bases across the solar system were coming alive, and humanity's secret was finally being revealed. For 3 centuries, Earth had shown the galaxy a friendly face. Traders, explorers, diplomats, curious little humans who asked too many questions and made everyone slightly uncomfortable with their enthusiasm. The Galactic Concord had welcomed them as harmless newcomers. They had never looked deeper. Project Prometheus had begun 200 years ago, when humanity's first deep space scouts returned with troubling news. The galaxy was not kind. Dozens of species had risen and fallen. Wars of extinction were common. The strong consumed the weak, and no one seemed to find this unusual. The Earth's leaders had made a quiet decision. They would smile. They would trade. They would make friends. And they would prepare for the day when smiling was no longer enough. 800 warships. Each one built in secret, crewed by rotating skeleton crews, maintained by engineers who took their oaths to the grave. The greatest military secret in human history, kept for 2 centuries against a threat that many hoped would never come. That hope was dead now. 7 million humans had killed it. Captain Rosa Medina walked through the corridors of the Remembrance and felt the ship humming beneath her feet. She was 42 years old. She had trained for this command for 15 years. She had always known this day might come. She had not known it would cost her everything. Her sister Maria had lived on New Brisbane. Maria, who had taught elementary school. Maria, who had sent her videos of her daughter's birthday parties and complained about the local weather. Maria, who had been standing in a classroom when the plasma fire fell from the sky. Rosa had a message from Maria on her datapad, sent 2 days before the attack. She could not bring herself to open it. Across Earth, the mobilization continued. Recruitment centers that had been quiet for generations were overwhelmed. Old soldiers dusted off uniforms. Young idealists demanded their chance to serve. Scientists who had never held weapons volunteered for any role that would help. The Concord's observers reported what they saw with growing disbelief. Within 2 weeks, Earth had achieved 94% voluntary mobilization. Not conscription, not force, just a planet of people who had decided, together, that enough was enough. In secret meeting rooms and encrypted channels, humanity's intelligence networks finally shared what they knew. For decades, human spies had been dismissed as paranoid hobbyists by other species. Humans collected information obsessively, they said. It was a quirk of their psychology. Harmless, not harmless. Prepared, the Draven hegemony controlled 47 worlds. Their fleet numbered 2,000 warships. They had done this before, to 6 other species. Some were enslaved. Some were extinct. None had fought back successfully, but none of them had been human. Admiral Okafor briefed the War Council on the enemy's weaknesses. Their supply lines were long. Their commanders were arrogant. They had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender, because every enemy they had faced understood that surrender was the logical choice. Humans were not always logical. The first fleet departed 3 weeks after New Brisbane burned. 200 ships, carrying 50,000 soldiers and crew. Their destination was not Draven space. They were going to Station Meridian. They were going to the Galactic Concord. They had questions that needed answers. Ambassador Tanaka remained at the station, watching the alien delegates pretend that nothing had changed. She received the fleet's approach notification and smiled for the first time in weeks. The galaxy had ignored humanity's pleas. They had calculated that human lives were an acceptable cost for their own safety. They had made a business decision. Now they would learn what that decision had purchased. Commander Sketh, meanwhile, reported to High Command that the human response was proceeding as expected. They were mobilizing their military, yes, but they were a minor species with limited resources. The hegemony would give them a few months to exhaust themselves, then finish what they had started. He recommended patience. Soft species always tired eventually, his superiors agreed. They had done this many times before. They did not understand that this time was different. They did not understand that humans had spent 300 years preparing for exactly this moment. They did not understand that the friendly traders and curious explorers they had dismissed were the children of a species that had invented nuclear weapons before they invented peace. In the cold of space, the human fleet moved through hyperspace toward its destiny. The giant was awake, and it was angry. The Fenari delegate was halfway through his morning meal when the alarms began. Emergency lights flooded the corridors of Station Meridian as 200 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the massive diplomatic hub. Panic spread through the station like fire. Species that had never seen human military vessels scrambled to understand what was happening. Security teams mobilized. Escape pods were prepared. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka walked calmly through the chaos toward the assembly chamber. She had been waiting for this moment. The great hall fell silent when she entered. Dozens of alien delegates stared at her, their various eyes wide with fear, confusion, and something that might have been shame. The holographic displays showed the human fleet holding position, weapons powered but not firing. Tanaka reached the speaker's platform and stood where she had begged for help just weeks ago. This time, she did not beg. "We trusted you," she began. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent chamber. "We came to this galaxy as friends. We shared our technology. We traded fairly. We asked for nothing but peace and partnership." She activated a holographic display. Documents appeared. Communications. Meeting records. The evidence that human intelligence had gathered over years of patient observation. You knew the Draven were coming. You knew 6 months before they attacked New Brisbane. Your council met in secret and decided that sacrificing human colonies would satisfy their expansion. You calculated that our deaths would protect your own worlds. The Fenari moderator tried to speak. "Ambassador Tanaka, these accusations are true." A Tauric warrior stood from the delegation seats, his massive armored form towering over those around him. "She speaks truth. We were there. We voted against the measure, but we were outvoted. We said nothing afterward." He lowered his head. "Our shame is complete." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Other delegates began to react. The Mundari Trade Coalition's representative maintained a cold expression, showing no remorse. The Fenari delegation wept openly, their 4 eyes streaming with fluid. Tanaka continued. 7 million humans died because you found it convenient. Children burned in their schools. Families were vaporized together. And you watched, and you calculated, and you decided it was acceptable. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We did not come here for revenge against you. The Draven will answer for what they did. But we wanted you to understand why we will never trust you again. We wanted you to look us in the eyes and know that we know." The chamber remained silent. There was nothing to say. Finally, Tanaka spoke again. "We are withdrawing from all Concord agreements. We will handle the Draven ourselves. When it is over, perhaps we will discuss the future. But that future will not look like the past. You have taught us what the galaxy truly thinks of us." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. If any species chooses to stand with us, to help us fight, we will welcome them. Not as subjects, not as servants, as equals. We remember who helps us in our darkest hour." The Tauric warrior stepped forward immediately. "The Tauric Confederation pledges 5,000 warriors. We have failed honor once. We will not fail it again." A Fenari medical officer stood. "Our warships are few, but our hospital ships are many. We offer healing to those who fight." Even a young Mundari trader rose, shocking his own delegation. "I defect. I have economic data on Draven supply chains. I will not serve leaders who trade in genocide." Tanaka nodded to each of them. Then she walked out of the chamber, leaving the galaxy to contemplate what it had done. Far away, Commander Sketh received reports of the human fleet's actions. He was pleased. The humans were wasting time on politics instead of fighting. Soft species always did this. They talked and talked while the strong prepared to crush them. High Commander Vress agreed. The hegemony would give the humans a few more weeks to tire themselves out with speeches and displays. Then the real campaign would begin. Neither of them understood what they were seeing. The humans were not wasting time. They were building something. An alliance born not of treaties and calculations, but of shared purpose and chosen loyalty. Ambassador Tanaka returned to her quarters and allowed herself one moment of exhaustion. The performance was over. The truth was spoken. Now came the hard part. Her communication panel lit up with incoming messages. Tauric battle groups requesting coordination. Fenari medical vessels offering support. Individual beings from a dozen species volunteering to fight alongside humanity. The galaxy had betrayed Earth. But the galaxy was not one thing. It was billions of individuals, and some of them had chosen to stand with humanity when it mattered. Tanaka began answering the messages. Outside, the human fleet turned toward Draven space. The talking was done. Now came the war. 300 Draven warships held the Ferris Gate, a hyperspace junction that controlled access to the inner territories of the hegemony. Commander Reth had defended this position for 20 years. No enemy had ever passed as he watched the human fleet approach on his tactical display. 180 ships, smaller than his force, poorly positioned. He opened a communication channel and delivered the standard ultimatum. Human vessels, you are outnumbered. Surrender now, and half of you will be spared for labor service. Resist, and you will all die. You have 1 hour to decide. The response came in 30 seconds. This is Captain Rosa Medina of the Human Dreadnought Remembrance. We decline your generous offer. We have a counterproposal. Surrender now, and we will treat your crews fairly. Refuse, and none of you will leave this system alive. Reth laughed. His officers laughed. The humans were either insane or stupid. Probably both. He ordered his fleet to battle positions. The fight lasted 9 hours. It was unlike anything the Draven had ever experienced. Human ships did not fight like other species. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not surrender when outnumbered. They fought with a fury that made no tactical sense. That a human destroyer, its engines destroyed and its weapons failing, accelerated directly into a Draven carrier. The resulting explosion took both ships and damaged 2 more. The human captain transmitted one word before impact. Remember. Human fighter pilots ejected from crippled craft and boarded Draven vessels through maintenance hatches. They fought through corridors with sidearms and knives. When their weapons ran empty, they fought with their hands. Commander Reth watched his fleet die around him and could not understand what he was seeing. These were not soldiers. These were something else. Something that did not care about survival. Something that wanted only to hurt their enemy, no matter the cost. Captain Medina commanded the battle from the Remembrance's bridge. She had finally opened her sister's message before the fighting began. It was a video of her niece's 6th birthday party. Her sister's voice, warm and happy, asked when Aunt Rosa was visiting again. Rosa watched it 17 times during the battle. Each time a Draven ship exploded on her tactical display, she whispered a name. Maria, Suki, 7 million others she would never know. When the battle ended, the Draven had lost 298 ships. Only 2 escaped to carry word of what had happened. The humans had lost 67 vessels. It was not a victory by any normal standard. The losses were too high. The tactics were too costly. But the Draven had never faced an enemy who counted victory differently. Across the galaxy, other species studied the battle reports with growing unease. They pulled human historical records. They examined human entertainment. They analyzed human psychology. What they found disturbed them deeply. Humans had invented nuclear weapons before achieving world peace. They had spent centuries fighting wars among themselves. They had created entire genres of entertainment based on fear and violence. They had evolved on a world so harsh that their own planet tried to kill them constantly. And they had survived it all. The Tauric warriors, humanity's new allies, understood immediately. They are like us, their war leader declared. But worse, we fight for honor. They fight because something broke inside them, and fighting is all they have left. The Fenari medical teams treated wounded human soldiers and marveled at their resilience. Injuries that would kill other species merely angered humans. They asked when they could return to battle. They asked about their friends. They did not ask about themselves. High Commander Vress finally received the full reports from Ferris Gate. For the first time, he felt uncertainty. He had expected the humans to break after the first major loss. They had lost 67 ships and called it victory. He began to understand that he had miscalculated badly, but it was too late to reconsider. The hegemony had committed to this war. The only path forward was to crush the humans completely, to destroy their homeworld, to make such an example that no one would ever resist Draven expansion again. He ordered the full invasion fleet to prepare for the assault on Earth itself. Captain Medina stood on the Remembrance's observation deck after the battle, watching the wreckage drift through space. 67 ships, thousands of lives, friends she had trained with, served with, trusted. She did not regret the cost. She regretted only that it had been necessary. Her data pad chimed. New Brisbane survivors had been located. A Draven labor camp. 847 humans, including children, including, possibly, her niece. Medina stared at the report for a long time. Then she walked back to the bridge. The war was not over. Not even close. 6 months of war had changed the galaxy. Draven systems fell one by one, not to overwhelming force, but to relentless pressure. The humans never stopped. They never negotiated. They never rested. They simply advanced, system by system, burning the hegemony's empire to ash. Captain Rosa Medina, now promoted to admiral, led the assault on Camp Epsilon 7. Intelligence reported 200,000 slaves held there, beings from 6 different species. Some had been born in captivity, never knowing any life beyond the labor barracks. 847 of them were human. The camp sat on an airless moon, protected by defense platforms and guard ships. A frontal assault would destroy the prisoners along with the defenses. The Draven knew this. They expected it would force the humans to negotiate. They still did not understand humans. Medina ordered her Marines to prepare for a ground assault. They would drop in stealth pods, disable the defense grid from inside, and extract the prisoners before the Draven realized what was happening. The plan was insane. The margins for error were zeroed. The Marines volunteered unanimously. Sergeant James Okafor, no relation to the fleet admiral, led the first team through the maintenance tunnels beneath the main holding facility. They moved in silence, disabling guards with non-lethal weapons when possible, lethal ones when necessary. Every second counted. Every sound could doom them all. They reached the central holding block at midnight by Earth time. The door seals broke with a soft hiss. Light spilled into corridors that had known only darkness for decades. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Children who had never seen sunlight. Elderly beings who had been slaves for so long they had forgotten their own names. Families separated across different blocks, never knowing if their loved ones still lived. And humans, survivors from New Brisbane, their eyes hollow, their bodies thin, but alive. Medina herself led the second wave, securing the extraction route while the first teams guided prisoners to safety. She moved through the corridors with her weapon raised, every sense alert for threats. She found her niece in Block 7. Suki was 7 years old now. She had been 4 when the Draven took her. She did not recognize her aunt. She did not speak. She simply stared at the armored figure before her with eyes that had seen too much. Medina knelt down, removed her helmet, and spoke softly. Suki, I am your Aunt Rosa. I came to take you home. The girl's expression did not change. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched Medina's face. Her small fingers traced the tears running down the Admiral's cheeks. Mama said you would come, Suki whispered. She said family always comes. Medina carried her niece out of the camp personally. Around her, thousands of freed prisoners stumbled toward the extraction ships, blinking at lights they had not seen in years. Fenari medical teams worked frantically to stabilize the most critical cases. Tauric warriors stood guard, their faces grim with fury at what they witnessed. The last transport lifted off as Draven reinforcements arrived. They were too late. The prisoners were gone. The camp was empty, and the message had been sent. Humanity would not leave its people behind. High Commander Vress received the news with cold fury. The humans were not just defeating his forces. They were humiliating them. They were proving that the mighty Draven hegemony could not protect its own conquests. That he made his decision. If conventional tactics could not break the humans, he would strike at their heart. 900 warships would assault Earth directly, destroy the homeworld, and the humans would finally understand their place. The fleet assembled in secret, gathering at the edge of Draven space. Vress inspected his forces personally. The largest armada in hegemony history. Nothing could stand against it. Ambassador Tanaka received the intelligence report at Station Meridian. The Draven were coming for Earth. Everything humanity had built, everything they had fought for, would end if those ships reached Sol. She did not panic. She did not despair. She simply nodded and sent a single message to High Command. They are coming. Are we ready? The response came from Fleet Admiral Okafor himself. We have been ready for 200 years. Let them come. Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. The Draven thought they were launching a surprise attack. They thought Earth was undefended. They thought they understood humanity. They understood nothing. In the darkness of space, 900 Draven warships entered hyperspace, carrying the full might of a dying empire toward a planet that had been waiting for them since before the hegemony existed. Earth was ready, and Earth would answer. 900 Draven warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sol system and found nothing. No defense fleets. No orbital platforms firing. Just a single automated transmission broadcasting on all frequencies. Welcome to Sol. You will not leave. High Commander Vress studied his sensors with satisfaction. The humans had sent their entire fleet to attack Draven space, leaving their homeworld undefended. Arrogance. Stupidity. Exactly what he expected from soft species who did not understand proper warfare. He ordered his fleet to advance toward the blue marble hanging in the void. Earth, the cradle of humanity. Once it burned, the war would end. They passed Mercury without resistance. They crossed Venus' orbit and detected no threats. Mars sat silent, its red surface peaceful under the distant sun. Vress began composing his victory address. Then the sun's corona flickered with impossible light. From stations hidden in Mercury's shadow, ships emerged. From bases beneath the Martian surface, more ships rose. From the frozen depths beyond Pluto, from hollowed asteroids, from the rings of Saturn, the true human fleet revealed itself. 600 warships. Fresh. Fully armed. Waiting. Project Prometheus had kept one final secret. The ships that attacked Draven space were only part of the force. Earth's defenders had always remained home, hidden, patient. Vress stared at his tactical display as red markers surrounded his fleet from every direction. He had walked into a trap 200 years in the making. All ships, he commanded, his voice steady despite the cold spreading through his chest. Attack formation. Target the planet. If we are to die, we take their world with us. The Battle of Sol began. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Human ships tore into the Draven fleet with weapons specifically designed for this moment. Generations of engineers had studied every Draven vessel, every weakness, every vulnerability. The technology had been prepared in secret, tested in hidden facilities, perfected by scientists who knew they might not live to see it used. Draven carriers exploded under precision strikes. Destroyers fell to coordinated attacks. Battleships that had terrorized dozens of worlds died in minutes. Overwhelmed by human fury and human preparation, Vress watched his empire die around him. 900 ships became 600. 600 became 300. The humans pressed closer, tightening the circle, allowing no escape. His flagship, the Dominion's Pride, fought until its weapons failed. Human boarding parties breached the hull within the hour. Vress prepared for honorable combat, drawing his ceremonial blade. Admiral Rosa Medina led the boarding team personally. She found Vress on his bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his guards, his blade raised. "Fight me," he demanded. "Give me a warrior's death." Medina holstered her weapon. "No." Marines stunned him before he could respond. He collapsed to the deck, his blade clattering away, his dreams of glory ending not in combat, but in quiet surrender. "You wanted to know why we fight," Medina said to his unconscious form. "We do not fight for honor. We fight because you killed 7 million people who wanted nothing but to live. And we remember every single one." The battle ended at sunset by Earth time. The Draven hegemony, which had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, surrendered unconditionally. Their military was dismantled. Their leaders faced tribunal. Their enslaved populations went free. 1 year later, Ambassador Tanaka addressed the reformed Galactic Assembly. The Concord had been rebuilt on new principles. No more secret votes. No more acceptable sacrifices. Humanity had not demanded territory or reparations. They had asked for only one thing. Memory. On New Brisbane, where 7 million had died, a memorial stretched across an entire continent. Every name inscribed. Every face preserved in holographic light. Admiral Medina stood before it with her niece's hand in hers. Suki was learning to smile again, learning to speak, learning that the universe held more than darkness. Medina placed her sister's photograph in the memorial's heart. Maria smiled out at the stars, frozen forever at the moment before everything changed. A young Finari diplomat found Tanaka at the ceremony and asked the question that haunted the galaxy. You could have conquered us all. You had the power. Why did you stop? Tanaka watched the sun set over the memorial, painting the inscribed names in gold and red. Because that was never the point, she said softly. We did not fight to rule. We fought so that no one would ever again look at 7 million dead humans and call it acceptable. We fought so the galaxy would understand what we truly are. She turned to face the young diplomat. We are not conquerors. We are not monsters. We are just people who refuse to let our children die unavenged. And now the galaxy knows. You do not touch Earth's children. Ever. The stars shone over New Brisbane. 7 million voices, once silenced, now echoed through eternity. A galaxy had learned too late what humanity truly was, not warriors. Not demons, just family. And family always comes